family.
Fox's David Spunt. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley says the Justice Department should focus its priorities on violent crime that's racking the country.
We're seeing shooting sprees, we're seeing murders, we're seeing carjackings all across the country, Biden DOJ won't lift a finger to do anything about the crime spree that is hurting and killing Americans, but they've got all the time in the world to target their political opponents.
Senator Hawley on Fox's Hannity. North Korea vowing to never negotiate away its nuclear weapons.
North Korea's legislature passing a law to preserve the country's nuclear weapons policy, with leader Kim Jong-un calling it irreversible. This, according to state media. The law also bans sharing of nuclear arms with other nations. Members also passing a law authorizing the military to automatically execute nuclear strikes against enemy forces if its leadership comes under attack. Kim Jong-un saying his country will never abandon its nuclear weapons and missiles, accusing the U.S. of a campaign to weaken North Korea's defenses. The UN's nuclear watchdog recently voicing concerns about North Korea's atomic program, with analysts saying they believe it's preparing to resume testing of nuclear weapons for the first time since 2017. Kristen Goodwin, Fox News.
In the NFL season kickoff, the defending Super Bowl champion LA Rams losing to the Buffalo Bills 31-10. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Are you looking for a new place to hang out with your friends? Let's go along the sidelines at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Located at 154 Iriarte Road, Unit 4 and 5 in Tamuning behind Royal Bigs. Sidelines, a hidden gem with nothing but great things to offer. Great atmosphere, great food, top shelf drinks, and a great team. What are we waiting for? Let the fun begin at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. See you there.
Choice Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning shows.
Hands-down winners of Guam's morning radio battle.
Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits.
Morning Mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all three.
671-888-7346. That's 888-REIO.
Happy day. This is Clara Manglona from Security Title. A power of attorney can be a useful tool in a real estate transaction, but if abused, it can result in devastating loss. Choosing your representative should be done with the utmost care and should be very specific about the powers being granted. To mitigate loss, the team at Security Title confirms with the owner prior to using a power of attorney to sell the property. Each transaction is unique. Let the professionals at Security Title use our experience to facilitate secure closing. We are here to help.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, especially not on Tailgater T-shirt Friday. We don't even think about infringing on any of people's rights on Tailgater T-shirt Friday. Okay, let's head for Demi Ekotny. But I've got to lay the foundation for the editorial by going with the front page story in today's Daily News. Founders of the Guam National Wildlife Refuge facilities at Retidian may be demolished and moved, and the fate of various cultural and human remains unearthed during construction for Guam's military buildup last year has yet to be decided. That was some of the discussion that took place Thursday during the 10th annual workshop for the 2011 Programmatic Agreement, the document governing how historic preservation is handled as 5,000 Marines are relocated to Guam. Residents and politicians expressed outrage. What else? and concern over the lack of advance notice and public access to the meeting. Maria Hernandez, where have I heard that name before? Now, it used to be Maria Hernandez somebody else. I can't even remember what it was.
A hyphen?
Just another name after it.
I don't recall.
Yeah. Maria Hernandez, the descendant of former landowners at Retidia. Now, this gives her special standing, Jose, right? It's kind of the kind of argument that Neil Weir would like. If you ever lived in Hawaii, then you have certain political rights with respect to Hawaii, even though you moved to Guam. Let's see. Maria Hernandez, the descendant of former landowners at Retidian and a member of a coalition representing landowners and families who oppose the firing range complex built in the area, said she found out about the workshop after a Zoom link to view it began circulating on social media at 10 a.m. Thursday. The meeting began at 8 a.m. according to the schedule obtained by the Daily News. I've always been vocal that these meetings should be open to the community. They shouldn't just be limited to a certain segment of the community. They should be open to the public, and we shouldn't just be finding out about them through WhatsApp groups, said Hernandez. Yeah, well, maybe for once I'd agree with Maria Hernandez. The Daily News request to attend the meeting was denied. By Joint Region Mariana's Public Affairs Officer Commander Katie Koenig, though she said there would be press briefing Friday. The paper did view the final hour of Thursday's meeting through a Zoom link. A formal invitation to attend the briefing and notice of the workshop wasn't received by the Daily News until 2 p.m. Thursday, after the first day of the workshop was over. Marine Corps Base Camp Bloss is in the pre-design phase for the demolition of the wildlife refuge facilities at Retidian and has awarded a contract for the environmental assessment for relocation. Camp Bloss environmental planner Andrew Soltz said during the workshop, the project planning to avoid and minimize impacts was done in conjunction with best available data. We purposely avoided known cultural resource sites within the area, Soltz said. A 1955 map of ancient Lottie Stone sites was provided by the Guam State Historic Preservation Office. Now, you know who that is, Jose. The most important person on the island. Shippo. Camp Bloss went down into that area and didn't find and relocate. Camp Bloss went down into the area. Now, that's quite an undertaking for a piece of real property. I've driven by there. There's that great big 5-story barracks. I wonder how they got that down there in Retidian Beach.
Wheels.
Yeah, Camp Bloss went down into that area and didn't find and relocate remnants of those Lottie stones. He, meaning Soltz, said. Yeah, well, I wonder why. Now, if there were Lottie stones down there before and they're not there now, who would have been the people who would have carted those Lottie stones away, Jose? What do you think?
There's, somebody knows where those are at.
Yeah. It was more than likely a bunch of GIs out on Liberty, right?
No.
No. The facility will be moved southwest within the refuge, and an existing trail from the 1950s will be developed to allow residents to reach the public access area. The site of the current buildings next to the public access parking lot at Retidian will be returned to a vegetative state. Now, I wonder if they're going to get the mayors of Jigo and Dedido involved in that, because they are trying their best to turn Marine Corps Drive into a vegetative state. and they've been pretty successful. Parenthetically, I would add that the Department of Public Works semi-annual deforestation project has begun along Marine Corps Drive, but they really aren't doing a very good job, are they, Jose? Back to the article. A new public access route to the refuge is needed because the area falls within a surface area danger zone for the Camp Bloss live fire training range complex. 4 firing ranges have been completed and a multi-purpose machine gun range is under construction. The area, heavily utilized by local fishermen, may be shut down for up to 75% of the year. Senator Sabina Paris, one of the most strident environmental wackos, disagreed with the relocation of the facilities and the shifting of archaeological resources that were rich in the area. I just believe that this area is almost like the birthplace of the Chamorro people. Wow, the birthplace of the Chamorro people. Probably better than the maternity ward down at GMH, right, Jose? Yeah. The birthplace of, there's so many archaeological finds here, it should not be touched, Paris said. Sol said the Department of Defense already reached a memorandum of agreement with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on the relocation, and no further cultural assessments were planned. On the matter of public access, Rosenfeld, now who is Rosenfeld? His name has not come up in this article before. Rosenfeld said the workshop is not usually open to the public. It's a workshop, so it's a working environment. And so really it's to give the signatories the space in the room to be able to have a consensus, come up with a decision so that we can stay on agenda, Rosenfeld said. Those who weren't on the roster of guests were asked to wait until signatories responsible for adhering to the programmatic agreement voted on a motion to allow the public in. She said, so Rosenfeld is what we used to call a female. That was the first item on the agenda. The signatories include a representative from the Marine Corps Joint Region Marianas, from the Marine Corps, Joint Region Marianas, the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, the Guam State Historic Preservation Office, also known as the SHPO, and the CNMI State Historic Preservation Office. Rosenfeld said Friday's workshop will be open to the public. Okay, so that's the background for today's editorial.
There's a couple of paragraphs that were, one that was edited because they had introduced Rosenfeld right before they put the part in her last name.
Uh-huh.
And they just introduced her as the Camp Bloss Public Affairs Officer. And they asked her if the relocation of the site would impact the refuge area itself. And Rosenfeld said the responses would have to come from the Marine Corps Command stateside and wouldn't be expected as of 5 p.m. Thursday. And then they added a couple of paragraphs statements from Speaker Terlahi. Do you want to hear those?
Yeah.
Okay. Speaker Therese Terlahi, who had been advocating for the live broadcast of the meeting and was in attendance Thursday, said the lack of public access was, quote, nonsensical. Terlahi is not a signatory to the programmatic meeting, but was let in several years ago after she requested access. Quote, there are non-signatories who have been let in by Joint Region Marianas every year. In fact, the room is full of them, and they are at the table with us, she said. With additional construction taking place due to the relocation of the refuge facilities, more transparency was needed, she said.
Where did you find that, Jose?
That's online.
I couldn't even find the article online at all.
Yeah, that's the website version.
Yeah,
not the e-version. Yeah,
I could find it in the e-version, but I couldn't find it in the website version. Okay, so anyhow, that's where we are. So that the hard copy left out some really important stuff there, right? So in order to open that meeting up, the decision would be made where, Jose?
From the Marine Corps. Let's see. I'm sorry. They come on, I just found it here. The Marine Corps Commands, which is stateside.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And that they might have made a comment, but this was published before 5 p.m. yesterday.
Okay, so here's the editorial. Invite. Residents, media should be privy to military discussions that will affect our lives. It doesn't take too long to do keyboard searches of military projects that have had devastating consequences on their host communities. From jet fuel leaks into water pipes in Hawaii, to Agent Orange use on Guam, to the contaminated waters of U.S. Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, a host of communities throughout the U.S. and its territories have had to bear long-term consequences of Department of Defense installations. Military officials joined lawmakers of the Guam legislature on Thursday to further discuss the current programmatic agreement, the agreement that outlines and governs upcoming military projects on the island. Unfortunately, neither residents nor members of the general public or media were invited to participate. We believe this lack of transparency and involvement is a disservice to the community and to the people whose roots on Guam predate the establishment of the United States. And this is important because what? Are we back to, what's her name? Dulce Amor? We're talking about roots and jungling? Yeah.
Revegetation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the depth of your roots depends, your entitlements depend on the depth of your roots. Media presence at such discussions should not be seen as a threat or a security risk, but as a nod to truth and transparency, an open commitment that says, yes, Guam, your lives, your voices, and your say and your future should be part of the military buildup process, and we have nothing to hide. As it stands, this decision, as with so many decisions regarding the lack of public and media participation, does nothing more than incite a sense of distrust and feelings of exclusion. Programmatic agreements allow federal agencies to govern the implementation of a particular agency program or the resolution of adverse effects from complex projects through negotiation between the federal government agency, the appropriate SHPO, Tribal Historic Preservation Officer, and the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, according to the Council's website. Not all on Guam are opposed to military buildup. In fact, news stories and public commentary on the issue show there's great support for an increased defense presence and the financial investments that accompany such strategic planning. Open meetings, like the one held Thursday, or at the very least providing another meeting time and venue to share new developments concerning the buildup, could go a long way toward improving community relations. And today must be the day, because I have the editorial right here, and I got to say that was a real editorial. You know, it laid out what was going on, and it took a position on it, and I got to take my own position on it. You know, no matter how the military conducts itself here, the environmental wackos, the cultural warriors, and all the other varieties of separatists are going to look for even a single comma being out of place. And when they find that that comma is out of place, they're going to call it a 4-alarm fire. You know, an attack on democracy, the end of all of the things we cherish, on and on and on and on. So, military guys, you got to be really on your guard. And the best advice I can give you, err on the side of openness and transparency. And for crying out loud, don't lock out the media. Now, if it's something that's really secret, it's something that has a security dimension to it, you know how to handle that. But if it isn't, then don't treat it like it is. And like Jose read to me, the part that got cut out of the hard copy, approval would have to come from Marine officials off island before we could decide if we let the people in. The news story said the first item on the agenda would be a motion to allow public access. So, you know, you're already off to a horrible start here. Now, as no secret that I'm very supportive of the buildup. I'm very supportive of the Marines coming to our island. I could spend the rest of the show telling you exactly why I feel that way. However, I'm not real happy with the idea that we got to tear down that wildlife refuge, the building and et cetera that's down there. Because if there's anything that people really like, it's that. So how is it that we are now deciding this far down the road that it's got to be torn down? Shouldn't that have been in the original plans? Shouldn't we have known about that from the get-go? And if we didn't know about it from the get-go, please tell us why the decision was made just now, after he already turned as a broken ground on that machine gun range up there at what used to be called Retidian. Some call it Latexan. It's the same place. So here it goes, Jose. A little drum roll, please. The Guam Daily News gets the coveted blue star. Congratulations, Daily News. That takes you up to 83. And you've had a few, you've been becoming more and more regular here. Keep up the good work.
I found one thing very interesting at the very end of that op-ed.
Yeah.
Where the last sentence ended with, could go a long way towards improving community relations. I find very interesting that they say that community relations need improving when, just a little thing on the national level, you know how we heard the red speech that happened the other day? And,
yeah.
And all over mainstream media, leftist media, everyone's talking about how this could be a civil war that's happening. Oh my gosh, he's talking about something that's very real. And there's a lot of people going, where is this civil war happening in real life? Yeah. Where is it that we go out there and we're actually fighting amongst each other the way that the media is talking about? And I think this might be the same thing here. When there's a group of people that are rumbling very loud, and whether they're a majority of people or a small minority of people, when they rumble very loud, why is it that the media characterizes it as something that's drastic and something like needs improving? I would say that the community relations between the military and the local public is very good, because you have a lot of people working on base. Sure. You have a lot of people who are in the military, retired military, former who are veterans also of wars. That I think the relationship is very strong. Just because they disagree with some of the decision making doesn't mean that the relations is weak. I think it's very strong.
Well, it's good input. Thank you very much, Jose. Okay, so moving right along to the card. This is what I've got on the card. I've got Brandon versus Italy. PNC versus Keneal Weird. And I'm also going to pick up on the post coverage of Keneal Weird's latest tilting at another windmill. I've got criminals versus Levin. I've got Pete Santos and Levin versus Doug Moylan. Yeah. I've got MSN, Michael San Nicolas versus All In.
Wait, they're still talking about him?
Uh-huh. And then I've got Democrat Party versus Democracy. So, and of course, I start out with Paul Zerzan versus Systemic Racism. And you'll recall that Paul Zerzan worked at, he was working at the Department of Labor. And he noticed that there was a suspicious number of eye injuries arising with one construction company. Paul says he used to work in that kind of a shop in the Coast Guard, so he thought he ought to report it to OSHA. So he went and reported it to OSHA, figuring that OSHA would take some action, or at least look at the matter and see if there's anything there. But instead of doing that, OSHA ratted out Paul Zerzan to his boss within an hour of Paul Zerzan going there. The boss said, yeah, you go home for the rest of the day, Paul. The next day, they fired him. So Paul has taken his matter as a whistleblower to the Civil Service Commission. The Civil Service Commission voted to conduct an investigation. Of course, we know how that goes. And at the meeting on September 13, this item is on the agenda. Signing, order after hearing, Paul Zerzan versus Department of Labor. So we'll find out on September 13 whether justice triumphed or whether Paul Zerzan lost. Obviously, we have a favorite in this fight, right? Okay, systemic racism. And then we go on to Brandon versus Italy. Let's take a short break, and we'll head for Rome right after the break.
Pica's best radio station, but we're always looking for ways to be even better. Announcing the point on Alexa. In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream The Point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream The Point.
Tell me about it, stud.
Circle K's Craft Beer and Whiskey Festival is back on Saturday, October 22nd. We rockin' and rollin' at the Dusitani Guam Resort from 2 to 10 p.m. Bring your friends and come dressed in your best grease costume to win up to $500 in cash and prizes. So bust out those leather jackets and 50-style outfits as we party the night away at Circle K's Craft Beer and Whiskey Fest. Don't be a square. Get your tickets now at craftbeerfestguam.com or cruise on by any 76 Circle K location. Now that's cool, baby.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so here we are, Brandon versus Italy. And this is an article that ran in Patriot Pulse. The title, Nancy Pelosi is about to quit Congress to take this jaw-dropping job. Nancy Pelosi's run as Speaker of the House may come to an end in November. In the event
I can't get them to quiet. I'm sorry.
All right out there. Yeah. Okay. In the event Democrats lose power, Pelosi has a backup plan. And Nancy Pelosi is about to quit Congress to take this jaw-dropping new job. Republicans only need to flip 5 seats to win control of the House of Representatives. Even though polls show the race for Congress is narrowing, after Rhino Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell engineered Republican surrenders on guns, socialism, and corporate bailouts by depressing the conservative base, it's not going to take a red wave to achieve that goal. Should Democrats lose control of Congress, it's expected that Nancy would retire rather than serve as a backbench member in a toothless minority. Nancy shouldn't do that. She's the speaker, right? She's entitled. And it appears that Joe Biden, also known as Brandon, may have a soft landing spot for Pelosi in mind. Joe Biden still has not appointed an ambassador to Italy. That vacancy makes more sense, as it appears Biden is leaving the gig open so he can appoint Pelosi to the position after the midterm elections. Fox News reports, sources tell Fox Business that Pelosi wants Biden to nominate her to become the next U.S. ambassador to Italy if the GOP takes the House majority in the midterm elections. Biden is holding the spot for the speaker, sources say, which is one reason he has yet to fill a position since taking office. Speculation earlier this year that a Pelosi ally and former Wall Street executive wanted the job has shifted with the increasing likelihood that the GOP takes the majority. There was no clarity yet on how a new Senate will react to a Pelosi nomination, but there was mixed reaction to her in the role from sources this week. Pelosi does not want to announce her retirement now. If Pelosi announced she was leaving Congress after the elections, it would send a signal to Democrat voters that there's no point in turning out in November since party leadership considers the midterms a loss. Paul Ryan did that in 2018, and his retirement announcement before midterm elections helped Democrats win a majority in the House of Representatives. Nancy Pelosi wants to avoid that mistake, but that does not mean that Pelosi is not already preparing for life after Congress. So there it is, Pelosi to Italy. There's only one thing missing from this story, Jose. We don't know what Matt Topasnia's position is on this. You'll recall...
Does he have a Rome license?
Yeah. You'll recall that when Nancy came through Guam, she was greeted by the governor, the lieutenant governor, and Matt Topasnia, who apparently packs a certain amount of gear where Nancy's concerned. All right, let's go on to the next item on the card. I'm going to go to the Post and then PNC on the latest acrobatics by Keneal Weird. Court dismisses challenge to overseas voting laws. A group of Americans, including 3 who live on Guam, have failed a legal test in their attempt to change current federal and state voting laws. A federal district court judge in Hawaii has dismissed a lawsuit brought by individuals living in the Virgin Islands and Guam, formerly residing in the Aloha State, who object to being excluded from national and state programs that allow U.S. citizens living in foreign countries and also the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas to participate in state and national elections by mail-in ballots. The ruling, which granted a motion for summary judgment to end the suit, described that the, quote, narrow legal issue before the court was whether 2 laws, the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Voting Act and Hawaii's Uniform Military Overseas Voters Act, violate the Equal Protection Clause by declining to extend the right to vote absentee in federal elections to former Hawaii residents. The court rejects quote, the court rejects plaintiff's argument that the statutes are unconstitutional merely because they do not grant plaintiffs a right given to others, particularly when plaintiffs' fellow territorial residents lack such a right. I'll read that sentence again. The court rejects plaintiffs' argument that the statutes are unconstitutional merely because they do not grant plaintiffs a right given to others, particularly when plaintiffs' fellow territorial residents lack such a right. Judge Jill Otake of the U.S. District Court for the District of Hawaii wrote in her 38-page order. Equally American, an organization that brought the suit and other legal challenges to federal laws that exclude U.S. territories from legal protections or programs afforded to the residents of the 50 states, panned the decision as applying the most lenient form of legal review when considering the legal arguments presented. In a release, Keneal Weird, the organization's president and founder, took issue with another conclusion from the court, that Congress and state legislatures are allowed to limit voter eligibility for unincorporated territories, including Guam. Now, I got a little interesting fact to toss out here for you. If you were to take a look at the United States Constitution, I got a really nice booklet here, you will not be able to find anywhere in the Constitution language that says U.S. citizens have a right to vote. It just isn't there. And that's a really important thing to understand because, you know, we toss around, oh, you got a right to vote, you're taking away my right to vote, etc. It just isn't there. The Constitution primarily speaks to persons and not citizens. And I've told you this before, 1924 was the first time we had a presidential election in which everyone who voted was a citizen. Up through 1920, non-citizens could vote in presidential elections because the Constitution doesn't say you must be a citizen to vote in a presidential election. Okay, going back to this article here. When legislatures selectively exclude some people from being eligible to vote, while including others who are similarly situated, that should be subject to the court's highest level of scrutiny. That's strict scrutiny, and I've mentioned that before, strict scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny. The judge says, and Hawaii said rational state basis is good enough. And Weir goes on to say it also defines reason to protect the right to vote for president for people who move from a state to the Northern Marianas, but deny that right to people who move to Guam, another U.S. territory that's less than 150 miles away. Where you live shouldn't affect your right to vote, but of course it does. And I pointed out when I went through this yesterday, if you lived on Guam and moved to the Northern Marianas, believe it or not, you could vote in Guam and the Northern Marianas because of this Ukava law. Otake ruled that according to, quote, well-established case law, where you live does affect your right to vote in the United States. She cited cases that concluded territorial residents do not have a right to vote in federal elections. One of those cases is called Attorney General of Guam versus the United States, a 1984 case decided by Judge Cristobal Duenas. Going on, including one involving Guam that states the right to vote for U.S. president granted by the Constitution, quote, adheres not in citizens, but in states. And once again, I keep saying this, many of your civil rights are creatures of federal, are found in federal rights. Political rights are a matter of state citizenship, not federal citizenship. Going on with the article here. Territorial residents do not have a right to vote in federal elections. former residents of the 50 states have no fundamental right to vote where they used to live, an assertion that plaintiffs concede, according to Otaki's rulings. Now, people like to toss that phrase, fundamental rights, which is not an easy term to define at all. You got to read a lot of case law before you can come up with a definition of fundamental right. And voting here and voting in Honolulu because you used to live in Hawaii is not a fundamental right. Going on, super citizens. The defendants who include Hawaii's chief election officer argued that if the absentee voting privilege were granted to residents of Guam, it would create a class of super citizens who were able to vote in federal elections while other island residents cannot. Concern about the disparity that would result from the creation of super citizen territorial residents who could vote in federal elections is a plausible policy reason for treating the subject territories as part of the United States, Otaki ruled, supporting legislative efforts to not consider Guam an overseas area in these programs. Now, what she's saying there is this: in that UCAVA statute, the term state is defined, and state is defined as the 50 states, Guam, American Samoa, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. They're defined as states, not the CNMI. And UCAVA says if you move from a state to a foreign country, then you can vote absentee in the foreign country, even if you abandon your residence in the state. So Guam is a state for that purpose. So ironically, Mr. Weird, the great, he's trying to defend the people of Guam. He's trying to defend the people of Guam by suing to say, you ought to treat Guam like a foreign country, is what he's saying. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. He lost on the same argument before in a case called Segovia. And if you read this case, Segovia is cited quite a few times as, here's the law. This law comes from a case that you lost. And I think that one went to the 7th Circuit because he filed it in Chicago. So now he's at the 9th Circuit. When he loses this one, he'll still have 10 more circuits to go. Okay, now, pretty good job on the part of the Post of laying out what that case was about. And then we turn to PNC. Now, you recall the last time we had PNC covered something like this, they ran Neil Weir's press release as though it were news that they had gathered themselves. And I got into something of a kerfuffle with PNC about that, saying, if you're going to run a press release, tell us it's a press release. But we'd hope that you do more than just being a publisher of press releases. Yes, sir.
Did you read the end of the article from the paper there?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, there's a missing paragraph that I find interesting.
Yeah.
Since you're talking about PNC.
Yeah.
The Guam-based plaintiffs, according to court documents, are Vicente Tapazna Borja, Edmund Frederick Schroeder Jr., and Patricia Arroyo Rodriguez.
Really?
All three are currently registered to vote locally, the Guam Election Commission confirmed.
Where do you find that?
Online.
The online edition?
The online edition.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'm angry. Why did they ask one talk show host and not the other one? Edmund Schroeder Jr., huh?
Vicente Tapazna Borja, Edmund Frederick Schroeder Jr., and Patricia Arroyo Rodriguez are the Guam-based plaintiffs.
Is that Vince Borja, the guy that's running for office?
That's a good question. I don't know.
If it is, I'm darn sure not voting for him. This sounds again like the insular cases. Yeah, people on Guam should be able to vote. Now, let me explain to you what would happen if we're one that can. Well, I never thought of that. I just want, I'm just for Chamorros and equal rights. And that's what, that's Neil Weir's soapbox. That's what he says he's doing. And interesting. Glad boy, that's amazing. Twice in a row, huh?
Gotta dig deep.
Yeah. You find the really key part of the story.
The missing part is the key part.
Yeah, and something other than the hard copy. Okay, let's take a short break here and we'll come back to PNC.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tuman location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglania from Security Title. A power of attorney can be a useful tool in a real estate transaction, but if abused, it can result in devastating loss. Choosing your representative should be done with the utmost care and should be very specific about the powers being granted. To mitigate loss, the team at Security Title confirms with the owner prior to using a power of attorney to sell the property. Each transaction is unique. Let the professionals at Security Title use our experience to facilitate a secure closing. We are here to help.
So here we go. We got about 10 minutes before Jose starts that big halftime show and his T-shirt sales. So this article ran in PNC, and as I mentioned, PNC, the last time something like this came up, just ran Neil Weir's press release as though it were news. No reporting at all. Probably those were the good old days, because they butchered the story so badly this time that if you didn't listen to Tall Tales or maybe read the Post, you wouldn't know what the heck is going on. Here it goes. Hawaii federal court dismisses territorial voting rights lawsuit. I would say that isn't even the right headline for this story. The fight for certain rights in territories, the fight for certain rights in U.S. territories wages on. Just recently, Hawaii federal court dismissed a territorial voting rights lawsuit. Now, what that sounds like to me is people living in a territory aren't able to vote in territorial elections. Of course, that's not what we're talking about.
Wrong.
We're talking about people living in a territory and not being able to vote in Hawaii elections. A federal court in Hawaii dismissed the case of Bora versus Nego, a lawsuit brought by Guam and U.S. Virgin Islands residents challenging overseas voting laws. The plaintiffs, two of whom reside in Guam and the other two in the Virgin Islands, currently are not allowed to vote for any federal election. Those elections include voting for president and for voting for U.S. Congress. They claim that certain overseas voting laws are unconstitutional to their voting rights, even though the right is given to others. Currently, the law allows residents who used to live in the mainland to vote elsewhere, even elsewhere through an absentee ballot. The purpose of the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act is to, quote, facilitate absentee voting by United States citizens, both military and civilian, who are overseas. Generality so far, not indicating a depth of knowledge. The next sentence really gets me. The law seems...
You mean the law isn't clear?
The law seems only applicable to those living in the Northern Mariana Islands and not in U.S. territories. It seems. Now, when you're writing a news story, when is it okay to use the word seems? All right, here we go. This means that former mainland U.S. residents, and of course we're talking here about Hawaii, not the mainland. No sense being straightforward when you can confuse your audience. Well, mainland, that's not, Hawaii's not the mainland. This means that former mainland U.S. residents can cast an absentee ballot as a resident in the CNMI, but they can't cast an absentee ballot in places like Guam or the U.S. Virgin Islands. That's true. One source close to the case gave this example to PNC. Now, fasten your seatbelts for this. This is pathetic. Here's the example. If a U.S. military service member who resided in the States were to be stationed in Japan, they can cast an absentee ballot. That's true. However, if they leave the military and decide to stay in Japan, they lose their ability to vote for president and Congress.
That's wrong.
It's just dead wrong. And, you know, part of it is this. People, absentee ballot voting has been around for a long time, and a lot of people have done it. It has nothing to do with UCAVA, right? I've done it myself. I've been off island on election day, went through the process, etc. I signed some papers in front of a notary, mail it back, and so on. And we had a caller yesterday, Harold, who, because he had been in the military, thought he understood UCAVA. But although they're both addressed by the same statute, they're totally different creatures. Absentee voting means this. Just put aside UCAVA. It means this. You live in Wisconsin. You have a residence in Wisconsin. You've never abandoned your residence. You haven't established a residence somewhere else. And you're away from the state on election day. You can vote absentee. Okay. If you are in the military service, you could be gone for 20 years, and you could continue to do that because being in military service and nothing more does not constitute abandoning your residence. So that's how absentee voting works. You live in Wisconsin, the Army sends you to Japan, you finish your 20 years, you retire, you want to stay in Japan. Can you vote absentee? Not the way you used to. Not because you're a serviceman overseas. But you can use UCAVA, which has only been on the books since the 80s.
1986.
1986. And what UCAVA says is this. If you ever lived in one of the states, one of the 50, and you left, and you went overseas, abandon your residence, have no intent to ever go back, intend to stay in that foreign country forever, vote, fight in their army, do whatever you want. The state is obligated to send you an absentee ballot. No, unfortunately, we use the term absentee ballot for both of those phenomena, but as you can see, they're totally different. No relationship whatsoever. So, you know, you run this. If a U.S. service member reside in the States were stationed in Japan, they can cast an absentee ballot. However, if they leave the military and decide to stay in Japan, they lose their ability to vote for president and Congress. This is a news story. You know, no one, it's PNC. No wonder Patty signed on to be the plaintiff, a plaintiff. They just don't understand what the hell is going on here. It's the insular cases all over again. Okay.
I would drop that source in a hurry.
Really. The example echoes the story of Vicente Borra, a 28-year veteran of the Navy. I guess that's not our Vince Borra then, huh?
That's a good question.
20.
No, the math doesn't sound right.
No. 28-year veteran of U.S. Navy who lived in Hawaii and established residency there. However, relocating to Guam for his wife's medical treatment and establishing residency on the island, he completely lost the right to vote for president and Congress. Oh, my goodness.
That happened to me, too.
Why did they do that to him?
Did that happen to you, too?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it did.
Outrage.
Yeah, I was outraged. I really was. Of course, I think probably it was a good thing because I only got to vote once, 1960. Back in those days, you had to be 21 to vote. I was 21 in 1959, December of 59. 60 rolls around, I can vote. Kennedy versus Nixon. I voted, and I'm ashamed to say I did not vote for Nixon. So probably a good thing I didn't get to vote after that. I probably couldn't have been trusted with it, right? So when I was going PNC, you took an important story and you screwed it up so bad that no one will ever figure out what's really going on unless they listen to this show. Maybe that's good. Okay, let's break for the halftime show. Jose wants to sell some more T-shirts.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Britain begins its mourning period on Jack Callahan, Fox News.
It's just a sad day. It's just very, very sad day.
For most British, Queen Elizabeth is the only monarch they've ever known. Now they await King Charles III to address the country later today on yesterday's death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth.
During her reign, Queen Elizabeth II served as the Colonel-in-Chief of 16 British Army regiments and corps. She was the first female in the royal family to serve on active duty in the British Armed Forces. She is the last surviving head of state to have served during World War II. Princess Elizabeth was just 13 years old when war broke out on September 3rd, 1939. She and her sister, like 2 million other British children, were sent to live in the countryside to protect them from the air raids. During her life, she experienced upheaval in Europe, the end of the Cold War, and a changed global national security environment.
Fox's Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon. Queen Elizabeth was 96. President Biden remembering his time with the Queen.
I had the opportunity to meet her before she passed, and she was an incredibly gracious and decent woman. And the thoughts and prayers of the American people are with the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth in their grief.
The President and the First Lady visited the British Embassy in Washington yesterday to sign the condolence book. Suburban Atlanta, 2 Cobb County Sheriff's deputies have been killed in the line of duty.
My 2 deputies were ambushed this evening and killed. The 2 suspects now that we believe are the perpetrators of this crime are currently in custody and being held at Cobb County Police Department now for questioning.
Cobb County Sheriff Craig Owens says the deputies were shot outside a home in the Marietta, Georgia area while trying to serve an arrest warrant. One of the suspects barricaded himself in the home for several hours before surrendering to police. The fallen officers' names haven't been released yet. America is listening to Fox News.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglania from Security Title. A power of attorney can be a useful tool in a real estate transaction, but if abused, it can result in devastating loss. Choosing your representative should be done with the utmost care and should be very specific about the powers being granted. To mitigate loss, the team at Security Title confirms with the owner prior to using a power of attorney to sell the property. Each transaction is unique. Let the professionals at Security Title use our experience to facilitate a secure closing. We are here to help.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
The government wants a federal judge in Florida to suspend her order for a special master in the Trump documents case.
Justice Department attorneys are appealing a wide-ranging order from a federal judge granting the appointment of a special master. In the filing, the Justice Department also wants Judge Aileen Cannon's decision prohibiting the use of seized records for investigative purposes put on hold. That, federal prosecutors say, would irreparably harm its investigation, and an intelligence community assessment of the classified records recovered from Mar-a-Lago. Attorneys for former President Trump and the Justice Department are supposed to propose names of a potential special master by Friday. At the White House, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Steve Bannon pleaded not guilty Thursday to charges he duped donors to give money to build a wall on the U.S. southern border. The case brought by New York prosecutors in a state-level reboot of a federal case that was cut short last year by a presidential pardon. A bankruptcy judge has approved a nearly $2.5 billion restructuring of the Boy Scouts of America that will allow the organization to continue to function while paying out claims to thousands of men who claimed they were sexually abused by Scout leaders or volunteers. In Utah, a state lawmaker finds himself in the middle of a sex abuse scandal.
A Utah state representative is accused of telling a Mormon bishop not to report a confession of child sex abuse to authorities. That allegation is part of a lawsuit saying the abuse then continued for years thanks to inaction by Utah GOP State Rep Merrill F. Nelson, a prominent attorney for the Mormon Church. Nelson allegedly took the initial call from a bishop reporting that church member Paul Adams had sexually assaulted his daughters. Phone records show that Nelson had multiple conversations over a 2-year span with 2 bishops who knew of the abuse. Paul Stevens, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Are you looking for a new place to hang out with your friends? Let's go along the sidelines at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Located at 154 Iriarty Road, Unit 4 and 5 in Tamuning behind Royal Bigs. Sidelines, a hidden gem with nothing but great things to offer. Great atmosphere, great food, top shelf drinks, and a great team. What are we waiting for? Let the fun begin at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. See you there.
Choice Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning shows.
Hands down winners of Guam's morning radio battle.
Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits.
Morning Mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all 3.
671-888-7346. That's 888-REI.
So there we are. Jose, do we have a new rogue on Rogues Gallery?
We have a new rogue, but I do not know who this is. Ray sent this to me this morning.
Yeah.
And let's see if you know who this person is.
Well, I don't know who he is, but I like him.
Yeah, he's wearing the right gear.
He's one of us. He's a tailgater. That's all that counts, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so halftime show on Friday, another great job by Jose. And then after the halftime show on Friday, we visit with Lou Leon Guerrero, who is known far and wide as very pro-abortion. And you'll see by watching this video of Lou testifying at a legislative hearing that she's also pro-infanticide. So go ahead, Jose. Let's run it.
Chair and members of the committee, good afternoon. My name is Lulian Guerrero, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you some of my thoughts and comments regarding Bill 195-32. I am aware that there is already federal legislation that addresses the issue at hand, thus making this legislation unnecessary. As I read the bill, what was glaring to me is that you are now walking into the realm of medical practice that is not your area of expertise. By passing this bill, you're saying to me that you are allowing a special interest group to say that you and they know better than the experts in obstetrics, family practice, pediatrics, neonatology, and medicine. By way of this bill, you have taken away the discretion, the responsibility, the acumen, and the judgment of that medical professional who is on the ground experiencing the circumstances and is more equipped to make the decisions. There are medical standards vetted through scientific research and medical knowledge that govern the practice of doctors and guide them in making their decisions. By way of this bill, you have said to our doctors, who are well respected and highly regarded in our community, we have no confidence in your ability. This bill not only diminishes the medical profession, but it further carries them to jail by criminalizing them if they refuse to abide by the mandate. By way of this bill, you have affirmed that doctor to have committed aggravated murder, and for that crime, we will put that doctor in jail for life. And by the way, they will rot in jail because you are not eligible for parole, work release, or educational programs outside the confines of prison. If this bill passes, we as a community, through your representation, will have mandated a government policy that ignores medical expertise and puts not only our doctors, but also our nurses, medical assistants, our physician assistants, and any health professional present at that event, and we're putting them in jail. These health professionals are treasures. They are valuable resources. We are working hard to recruit and retain them, and now we send them a message that they may end up in jail for practicing their profession. I know and truly believe, Senators, that this is not the route you want to travel. This bill is very anti-quality of life because it does not consider the expense that the family will incur as a result of mandating treatment that most likely will not result in a quality of life outcome for the infant. Instead, what this bill does is it will burden the family with enormous medical bills. On the conservative side, if care and treatment is given for a year, that family or the government, if the infant becomes a ward of the territory, will at a minimum pay $273,000 a year just on hospital room charges. This does not include pharmaceuticals, medical supplies, and health professional time. So it will be $273,000 plus a year. This means taking away limited resources that could be used by others that may have a better chance of a quality of life. I know that some will say you cannot put a price tag on life and money should not be a factor. But the reality of the situation is the family, the government, does not have the human and economic resource to provide the care that is required to sustain a life that medical science will tell you is not living a quality of life. You struggle daily to meet the challenges of healthcare costs. We saw that with the hospital and health insurance debates that you guys made. And now this bill will further add on to the challenges when it does not have to. Lastly, I would like to make this comment. We all have a greater challenge in our island. The community is more concerned on how we can decrease our unemployment rate of 13.3%. We are very concerned on how we can work together to provide more jobs because our job growth has been stagnant over the last 5 years. We are very concerned about access to health care. We are very concerned that we are not screaming to the federal government to include us in the health insurance exchange so that we can have affordable health care to everyone. We are very concerned about how we can provide affordable housing to many first-time home owners. We are extremely concerned about the rising crimes we see today. People do not feel safe in their homes. Women are scared to go to the grocery stores alone because they fear that they could be robbed in the middle of the day. Employees do not feel safe in their work environment. Domestic violence is on the rise. Sexual assault of minors and rape cases are on the rise. You have in your campaigns pledged to work on these issues. You were all voted to help address these concerns. The issues you ran on were why you are my senators. Most of the voters did not vote for you based on whether you are pro-choice or pro-life. Please, let's get back on track to the more compelling issues at hand that have a greater impact to the quality of life of our people. I ask that when you are considering this bill to seriously consider the negative consequences of this piece of legislation that I have just enumerated. Please talk to as many people as you feel is necessary. Talk to the experts that can give you factual and objective information. I trust that you will do your due diligence, and I know that you will act in favor of the greater good of our community. And in so doing, you will arrive to the conclusion that this bill should not pass. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So there you got it. So this is what we're talking about here. Lou says that if there is an attempted abortion and the baby survives the abortion, is born alive, physicians should let the baby die. Don't render any medical care that you would to any baby that is born alive.
Now, there's 3 parts to her testimony, Bob.
All right.
2 of those parts had nothing to do with the bill. The most important part, she buried it between the 2. What would I call it? A sandwich, distraction sandwich. Mm-hmm. But what's important is that despite her testimony, this bill was certified. It was as duly and regularly passed and then signed into law. So in November of 2013, despite Lulian Guerrero's testimony, we had a law that was passed that protected infants born alive. Infants born alive.
Yes.
Not in the womb. I think that's important to remember.
Yeah, and I suspect she probably never got over it. That was one of those, you have a sound effect from Greta. How does it sound?
How dare you?
Yeah, that's probably Lou's reaction to the whole thing. So Lou says if a baby is fortunate enough to survive an abortion and is born alive, don't render any medical care to that baby because it would cost too much.
So if you don't die, you'll live.
Yeah. So, let's just take that principle and extrapolate. So if we have the ability to provide life-saving services to a human, the first thing we have to figure out is the cost-benefit analysis. And if it costs too much, then the verdict has to be, let that human die, because we don't want to spend the money on saving that person. Now, if I were 23 instead of 83, maybe I'd feel a little differently about that. But if it works for babies, it'll work for old people too.
The disabled, think about all the costs we'd save. We didn't have to make anything compliant for the disabled.
Exactly. So think about all of the old folks. You know, I think one of the real growth industries on this island is dialysis. How many? We got about 5 dialysis plants on this island now because so many people have kidney disease. So dialysis is a big ticket item. So rather than spend the money on dialysis, you know.
Is there a suggestion that there's a board or commission that determines who gets to stay alive and who is put on the cutting board, so to speak?
Well, if Lou weren't the governor, probably I'd say yes. But Lou would say if we made that suggestion to her, she'd probably say, "You have no say." But there would be something, I suppose there would be something in the process of creating a longevity commission. And you'd have a couple of doctors and a couple of economists and a couple of accountants who would say, yeah, if we spent another $50,000, we could provide this person with 6 months more. No, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. And, of course, all of us who are alive know that life is pretty precious. Nobody is ready to turn in his shit just yet, right? But that's our governor, Lou Leon Guerrero, yeah, the one that we voted for, an avid proponent of abortion, who hired Jane Flores at the so-called Bureau of Women's Affairs to go out and stump for an abortionist, bringing Redu and Kaneshiro to the island long enough to get registered as licensed doctors here so they could go back to Honolulu and do chemical abortions and be plaintiff in the suit that loosened some of the strings on chemical abortions. That's who we put in office. So, you know, the old saying is people tend to get the kind of government we deserve. Is that what we deserve? Abortion and fantasy.
She was voted in by the population.
She was indeed, yeah. Okay, I think Lou's probably still in the hospital. It's probably not her on the line. I've got Pete Jr. on the line and another Joe. And Pete Jr. wants to comment on the Born Alive law. Go ahead, Pete Jr.
Hey, Mr. Klitzkie.
Sir.
Regarding that little speech that you allowed to play there from Lou, blah, 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 phooey. That's what I think. And let me ask you, Lou, are you the author of that speech, or did somebody else write that speech for you? You know, I'm getting tired of these politicians, man. You know, they want to be politicians, so do the work and write your own speech, because it don't sound, you know, these people are something else. And I'm not, and you know what? I'm being nice when I say politicians, con artists. We should start calling them con artists, flim-flam men and women, because that's all they are. You mean to tell me that if the child survives, if the child survives birth, or potential abortion, or what do you call it?
An attempted abortion.
Murder. What do you call it when you attempted murder? If the child survives attempted murder, you're going to go and make it into the world. You're going to kill that. You're going to attempt to murder that baby again.
You're just going to let it die.
That's good. Okay.
Yeah.
So how about death penalty for these inmates? We got too many inmates in that prison right now. And I think, and it shouldn't just be a death penalty for the murderers.
Yeah, but let's Pete Jr. Pete Jr. We're talking about the video. Do you have any other comments on the video?
All I'm commenting about is that little speech that you allowed to play from.
I don't allow it. I do it every Friday because I think people need to be reminded of who their governor is and one of the choices come November. I think people need to be reminded of that. I think you pretty much got a hold of it, right, Pete?
Yeah, and not to and here's another subject.
Yeah, well, let's just stick to this one for now, okay? I got another caller on the line. I want to give a chance to talk, but I appreciate your call, Pete Jr.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, Pete Jr. gets the picture, right?
Now he understands.
Yeah, very good, Pete. And then now Pete Jr., we have Pete, repeat, and Pete Jr. We're getting kind of petered out here, I think. Okay, we got another Joe on the line. Go for it, another Joe.
Okay, thank you, Bob. So on her speech, let me attempt to break it down. She herself said we should talk to each other, talk to professional experts, and really think it out. So there should be no opposition to us doing that from the far left. What's this? Feminist, feminist pro-abortion choice supporters. They shouldn't have a problem with us really talking and thinking about this with professional experts. And so, having said that, there are different issues here. Well, the issue is whether the mother wants to have the choice to kill a baby or not, which we kind of don't like that idea, but there are people who are saying, no, there's no compromise. That's murder. And there's who say, well, as a Democrat that's pro-life, I personally don't want to kill the baby, but I don't want to, force my views on others. But you're a lawmaker, right? You're a lawmaker, so you kind of have to make the laws. We kind of have to follow the laws, right? So I don't know how you can, it's a difficult responsibility, but that's kind of what you're running to be elected for, right, Uncle Bob? They're kind of running to make the laws and force, that we kind of have to follow. So, something to think about there when we're voting in this general election. And so, I think that Lou's testimony in the video, her point of reference, Uncle Bob, I think, is back in the 70s, right? I don't think she's been a nurse since, the 70s, possibly early 80s?
Could be.
So if that's the case, her point of reference might need to be updated because there's a technology, the medical, technology that allows for us to save both the mother and the child.
But, another Joe, when you're dealing with human life, it's not a matter, in my estimation, it's not a matter of technology, of weighing consequences, etc. It all comes down to one really, really simple question. And the question is this: when is it okay to take the life of a helpless, innocent human? And for me, the answer to that is never. If it costs money, it costs money. But then, that's what life is. It's never okay, even if technology has changed, et cetera. There shouldn't be a cost-benefit analysis to determine who lives and who dies.
I hear you, Uncle Bob. It's just that the younger generations, for us to find a way to be on the same page with them and to show them the way to look at it, the light, so to speak. Sometimes it seems like it has to take a little bit of an effort to reach out to the younger generations due to us losing the older generations, right, through age. So I think, they will teach us even, from the faith that, we kind of have to, find a way to not be combative, I guess the word is. If it's possible not to be combative about the issue with the younger generations, maybe we can do that.
I know if you come on the air one more time and tell me I'm not supposed to be combative, I'm going to punch you in the nose.
Sorry, Bob. I'm sorry. I know you don't give the benefit of the doubt, and you don't.
Yeah. No, I don't sugarcoat it, and that's why we get, I keep hearing, moderation. We got to be moderate. So I don't want moderation. I want people to come out and tell me really where they stand on a particular issue, and I will do this. I will do the same, and I don't let anybody off easy. If your opinion and mine are not the same, I'm always prepared to defend mine, and I hope you are.
Just the facts, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Friday on Michigan, by the way. So I'll tell you, Uncle Bob, I get confused for all sorts of reasons, pretty easy, and I keep having to go back to the priest and say, what am I getting wrong here, there, Father? What am I missing here? Because I know it's about saving a life because it's murder. There's no compromise there. But why am I getting confused on these issues? And
you shouldn't be, because you're a tailgater. And tailgaters usually have a pretty good thought process. Another Joe.
I'm only human, Bob.
The only possibility I can think of is that when you start to concentrate on these things, your mind drifts a compact impact.
Why, do they have an issue with abortion?
Yeah.
Are they having an issue of passing whether they want to pass pro-life laws?
Good talking to you, another Joe.
Okay, come on. Thanks for your time. You take care.
Yeah, I got somebody else come. I'm just about to get into Criminals versus Levin and Peter Santos and Levin Camacho versus Doug. But I got one more caller coming in here. Or do I, Jose? Okay, we'll head for Wrigley Field in the seventh inning stretch, and I'll see if I'm going to deal with this caller after the seventh inning stretch.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Tell me about it, stud.
Circle K's Craft Beer and Whiskey Festival is back on Saturday, October 22nd. We rockin' and rollin' at the Dusatani Quam Resort from 2 to 10 p.m. Bring your friends and come dressed in your best grease costume to win up to $500 in cash and prizes. So bust out those leather jackets and 50-style outfits as we party the night away at Circle K's Craft Beer and Whiskey Fest. Don't be a square. Get your tickets now at craftbeerfestguam.com or cruise on by any 76 Circle K location. Now that's cool, baby.
So here we go. Wrigley Field in Chicago, the seventh inning stretch. Chicago, Illinois, Wrigley Field, the world's most beautiful ballpark. And let's see who I've got waiting for me here. And the Pete Jr. Pete Jr. wants to repeat. Okay, world would like to apologize. He understands now. Apologize for what? Go ahead, Pete Jr.
Hey, Bob. I have to apologize there. I got a little hot-headed there, that's my trademark. But I think I've heard it. I heard you play it before. I didn't know it was a video from way back.
Yeah.
And it just gets me that. And I know you have to play, and I wish you keep on playing that, and expound on it, because I wasn't paying it the other times that I think I either I caught the tail end or at the beginning, and I had to get busy doing what my chores. But that, this woman, she's crazy. That's all I got to say, man. She's just out of her mind. I mean, the idea, and these Democrats, these people that follow the gullible. I'm gonna have to call them the generation suckers, because they fall. It's like they worship the ground she walks on. But do they really understand what they're worshiping?
Well, if they listen to Tall Tales, they probably got a pretty good clue, Repeat. But anyhow, thanks for calling back. And next Friday, we're going to run that video again. So make sure that you're tuned in on Friday, if not every day, right?
Yeah, but I would really like her to stop all her thoughts about killing babies and start thinking about the death penalty for these pedophiles that are locked up in here, because they cannot be corrected.
Well, you just
and the ones that are on murder, that killed people, they should start thinking about the death penalty and let's put these people out of their misery. You want to save money?
November 8th is on the way, Pete. Thanks for chiming in again. Talk to you later.
Okay.
All right, so I've got our Carl who wants to talk about reforestation and garbage on the roads. And then Peter Santos Ron McNinch wants to talk about Peter Santos and a write-in campaign. Patience, Ron, because it's on the calendar. I'm going to come to it in a minute. It looks like I got Johnny Utah calling in here. And Johnny Utah wants to talk about Ritidian. So he's on topic. So I'm going to go with Johnny Utah first. And then after that, I got to make sure I get everything in here, because this Pete Santos is an important one. Okay, so Johnny Utah, what do you want to tell me about Ritidian?
Well, I don't really want to tell you anything. I just wanted to ask a question. Why do they want to tear that building down? I mean, that was my favorite.
According to the news story, they have now determined that it will be in the danger zone for live fire when they're using the machine gun range. And my question was, I understand that, but why are you just figuring that out now instead of from the get-go?
So does that mean the grotto behind there that you can go into when it's a rainy season, that you can't go in there anymore either? How are you going to get down in there? When you come down the road, you end up right there at that visitor center.
Well, according to what the paper said, they're going to demolish the visitor center and let it go back to its natural state. Sad.
I mean, when you enter Ritidian, if you go north to the right, you end up in the Department of the Fish and Wildlife, secured area there where their private buildings are at. And if you go straight, there's the visitor center right there. And when you go to the left is when you go down into the park. I don't understand. And right there, when you cross that little hump there's a grotto and caves right there back behind there. It's like a little walking park area that's really nice back in there. So, I mean, I don't understand how they're going to destroy that area and still, how are you going to still have access to the park?
I'm only able to tell you what the news story said, Johnny. They said that they will relocate the visitor center, and it's still going to be open. So I didn't like the sound of it either, especially the timing of the whole thing, but
and that visitor center is cool. I love that little visitor center.
Well, if they had only known that, Johnny, had they only known that, I'm sure they'd have moved the machine gun range, because they'd have said, Johnny Utah really we can't tear this thing down. Thanks a lot for chiming in, Johnny Utah.
All right, bye-bye.
So long. Yeah, and then let's see. Our Carl wants to talk about reforestation and garbage. Reforestation or deforestation?
it kind of happens both.
Because I mentioned the deforestation of Marine Corps Drive between Dadido and Jigo. And that's my sarcastic way of saying they let the boonies get so out of control that they just about encroach on the pavement. Is that what you wanted to talk about, Carl?
Not kind of indirectly. You brought up that stretch from Dadido to Jigo and how it looks pretty awful. And it is bad. There's so much potential there. If someone with some imagination could replant some of the wild forest trees there, with these. I've seen some with like beautiful orange flowers, and there's so much potential with someone with imagination. But my concern is something similar. That area going out to Jigo is a little bit trashed up. So once in a while, I saw an article recently about this homeless encampment across from Micronesia Mall. And once in a while I walk that area. Of course, that area is a mess. But if you go further down on the sidewalk, past Jack in the Box, you keep walking, that area all along that way, all the way down to the turn that goes down to the Westin Hotel, that's all. It's just sprinkled with trash. And I walk there and I just shake my head, and think, man, this is what the tourists are seeing when they walk here. And I'm wondering, what are our senators waiting for exactly? For the homeless encampment to reach like 100 people? Like they have in the States, and there's fights breaking out and stabbings and shootings and, drugs and stuff. I mean, what are they waiting for? I don't understand.
Carl, what would you expect from the senators?
Exactly what's happening, actually.
Well, I mean, what kind of legislation do we need to keep people from putting tents out and living out on the street?
I don't know. There's got to be a way to relocate that. If they want to have a homeless encampment, at least not make it like right out in the open. We've only got 3 legs of our economic stool, and tourism is one of the biggest legs, and it's only now limping back to recovery. And, this is not helping. This is not helping at all.
Well, it's really the governor's bag. The governor is in charge of things like that. If she needs legislation, she sends it over and gets the kind of legislation she needs. But I agree, it is atrocious. And the Dadido Jigo thing, unfortunately, is classic because there's no thought of maintaining the road. We'll just let it go completely to hell, and then we'll come up and clean it up, and then 6 months later we'll do the same thing, never giving any thought that it should look decent all year round. Like the guy down in Inarajan keeps his village looking really, really nice.
Yeah, if we want to see where this encampment is going, all we need to look at is in the States where these encampments are breaking out and around the edges of major cities and sometimes inside major cities. And they just grow and they grow and they grow, and eventually things just start getting completely out of control where you have fights. And I was driving by there, and close by that encampment there was several people were standing around, looked like they were from the homeless encampment. There was one guy, I'm not sure, but they were squaring off, getting ready to have a fist fight out next to the street. And this was like maybe 3 or 4 months ago. So that's where it's going, and I don't know what they're waiting for. Are they waiting for a complete crisis to break out and come up on, with riding on the white steed, like, and their armor, I'm going to rescue us, like they so often do. They create the situation, through various ways, their policies, and then they come and rescue us. I'm just wondering, what exactly are they waiting for?
I got it, Carl. Carl, I got to move on. I got Ron McNinch, I got Frenchie. Both of them want to talk about Pete Santos. So I'm going to do my workup on Pete Santos, then I'm going to go to Ron McNinch, and then to Frenchie. So I'm going to have to say goodbye, okay?
All right, I will listen. Thanks.
All right, let's go to Churchill Downs, and then we'll ride Pete Santos all the way to the finish line.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
So here we are, Churchill Downs. And in Churchill Downs, I run into Peter Santos, Levan Camacho, and Doug Moylan. This morning, Pete Santos used Candid News to do a live video announcing that he is a write-in candidate for the office of Attorney General. I am disappointed. And the reason I'm disappointed reflects in the way I put this on the card. The card for this item is Peter Santos and Levan Camacho versus Doug. Because Levan is the incumbent, there's a certain inertia that comes with being the incumbent. The challenger has got an uphill fight to take down the incumbent. Doug is not campaigning. He's relying on earned media and the dissatisfaction with Levan. And Doug has gone out many times and told us how weak Levan is, and Peter Santos has also. But with Peter Santos and Doug both challenging the incumbent, what's going to happen is we're going to have 4 more years of Levan Camacho. And we can thank Peter Santos for it. Se Diyos maase lagatson para ikandidatumo. And there's so much wrong with him doing this. First of all, if he were serious about being the Attorney General, he wouldn't wait until now and come along and just be the spoiler. When it was time to turn in papers, he would have turned in his papers, and he would have let it be known at the time, I want to be Attorney General. But, he wanted to be Washington delegate. Then he wanted to be, then he thought maybe he'd be Attorney General, but then he didn't turn in his papers. And now here we are on the 9th of September when the election is the 8th of November. And he said, I'm going to be a write-in candidate. The lack of desire and that lack of steadfastness does not augur well for Pete. I hate to say this because we like Pete. Pete's is a real tailgater, a regular good contributor to the show, a guy who is not afraid to speak out and call out people who need to be called out. But what a disappointment to see him do this so late in the game. And then, of course, Pete's a lawyer. Pete has got to wonder, I got to wonder about this. How does a lawyer who works for the government of Guam mount a political candidacy without resigning from his job? Now, I suspect that he's listening now and he's saying, oh, yeah, I'm a write-in. I'm not a real candidate. But this came up once before when Frank Uggan, remember when Frank Uggan ran a write-in? And a couple of the people that were really important to that campaign, what was his name? The teacher. gosh, I can't think of his name. A teacher who was also part of taking down the Wonpat 10. They had a little group. Oh, shucks. Anyhow, he was called in on a improper political activities charge to the Civil Service Commission. Now, I analyzed it, and I said the fact that someone is a write-in candidate doesn't necessarily mean that a person who aids that person is guilty of improper political activities, because there's a definition of political candidate. And Frank Uggan, for most of his candidacy, didn't meet that particular definition. But the gnomes of the Civil Service Commission staff decided that he was, so he resigned his position with the Department of Education and then came back later on. So Peter...
Maybe David Cruz?
No.
You're not talking about Senator Rodriguez's running mate?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm talking about one of the civilian advocates. I can visualize a guy. I got a name right on the tip of my tongue. He's also a member of the Vigilance Committee. Oh, well, it'll come to me 2 minutes after the show ends, I'm sure. So that's my real disappointment with Peter Santos, because I think Peter Santos has laid the foundation of 4 more years of leaving Camacho. And let's see, I've got Ron was online first, so I'm going to go Ron, Frenchie, and then I got a third caller coming in. Go ahead, Ron.
This is Frenchie.
Oh, I'm sorry, Frenchie. Let me put you back on hold, okay?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ron.
Thank you.
I got... Okay, I'm sorry, line 3. Go ahead, Ron, if at first you don't succeed. Go ahead.
Yeah, third time's the charm. Hafide Cinder, Hafide Guam.
Did you want to talk about Peter Santos?
Yes, very briefly. I don't want to talk about Peter Santos per se. I just want to talk about running as a write-in for the Attorney General. I think that the Organic Act says that the Attorney General's race is up to the laws of Guam. The laws of Guam are at 5 GCA, Chapter 30, I think it's Section 3101B, deals with the election of the Attorney General. It's very specific. There shall be people running at the primary, and the top 2 at the primary then are named at the general election. That's it. No write-ins, no third-party lines, anything else. To qualify for the Attorney General, in my reading of the statute, of the Guam statute, 5 GCA 3101B, is that a person must go through the primary, nonpartisan primary, and then in order to be on the ballot in any way, they have to qualify as one of the top 2 for that position.
An interesting take, Ron. I suspect that, wouldn't you think that Pete would have gone through all that? Or maybe he's proceeding on the everybody knows that you can run as a write-in candidate in any election.
Well, I encourage everyone to please read the statute. Even the Guam Education Board, there's no write-in provision. Either you're a named candidate or not.
That's interesting. Well, thanks a lot for bringing that to our attention. Turn on the Law and Order notebook there.
Well,
yeah.
I know you would have found it right away anyway, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Ron. So much for that. That's an interesting point. Okay, I've got Frenchie, and then after Frenchie, I've got Flora, who's a first-time caller. Frenchie, let's just confine it to Peter Santos and not the other Peter Jr., okay? Go ahead, Frenchie.
Yeah. No, I was not going to address the Peter Jr. I think Peter is a special guy. One of the things I didn't like about his call for consider me for vote is that he did all these things with Chamorro. Chamorro represents only 30% of the population of Guam. So what about the rest of the population? I felt a little jilted, even though I understood what he was asking. I look at that, and to me, I always was conflicted about Peter regarding if he is either a whistleblower or useful idiot, because we've seen in the prior election with writing campaigns what it does. It splits the vote, and basically. Lewin Camacho would be very happy to have Peter run because he's taking away votes from Doug Moylan. That's all what he does. And I don't know what he's thinking, if he's actually working for somebody that stays in the dark, or if he's really a useful idiot. And I don't think he's as stupid as the step he's taking, and rather than he's actually what they call a fake resistance person. And we've seen that over and over again in our representative republic. And what it does is that it splits the vote, and splitting the vote is as dangerous as the high abstention that we've seen in the primary. And the people that always benefit from that are the incumbents. I'm writing a letter to the editor to the newspapers regarding this and the campaign for governor. I think it is a step back for democracy on our island, and it is not serving anybody else but Lewin Camacho. And so that's my take on this. And I hope we have enough time for this first-time caller.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That's an interesting point that you made, Frenchie. Pete and I todo na fino tomorrow ki idonia speech, and the demographics don't work out very well there. I suspect that very few of the folks who tune in to Candid News don't fino tomorrow. So, you could get 100% of everybody who speaks tomorrow and finish dead last. And then, of course, there's the non-demographic aspect of it. Frenchie said, I kind of felt left out, like he wasn't talking to me. And, of course, the reason that Frenchie felt that way was because he wasn't talking to Frenchie, right? I've solved the mystery of who the teacher was that ran afoul of the political activities law. Andrew Bainham. If you remember Andrew Bainham, yeah. Anyhow, my memory came back, and now I've got about 5 minutes to entertain a first-time caller named Flora before we say goodbye to our president. Good afternoon, Flora.
Hey, how good day? Can you hear me, sir?
No, I can't hear you, Flora.
You can't? Or you can? I'm sorry. I can't even hear myself.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, go for it.
I want to thank you. First of all, I love your show, and I also love Ray's show, but I really want to thank you, and you are really correct, man. It's like, Peter, Mr. Repeat, I was just taken aback, really, Mr. Klitzkie, that he would put his foot into the door to try and run for this situation. You're right. He's like a spoiler.
Yeah.
He's a spoiler, really, and I've been really upset what had happened to my brother. He was sucker punched and he was killed, and leaving Camacho's own, his office didn't do a good job. And the guy that killed my brother, for instance, he didn't stay 1 day in jail. 1 day, he's free, and I'm just so unhappy. So that I'm really looking forward to Mr. Doug Moylan getting into the game and winning this thing, because we need to do something about the situation, the crime in Guam. It's really sad, But I want to thank you so much. I really enjoy your show.
Well, very nice. I'm glad you called, Flora. Thank you very much for being a good tailgater.
Star, you have a nice weekend.
I'll do my best, Flora. Thank you. Flora, first-time caller. I think that probably an awful lot of people share my view that Pete and Repeat, both of them, are pretty much ensuring the re-election of Levin Camacho, a result that probably nobody's really crazy about other than Levin Camacho. But apparently the die is cast. He's going to go for it, and maybe he'll change his mind. Maybe when he finds out what the official position of Tall Tales is, it'll cause him to change his mind.
If there is no place for a write-in for the Attorney General's office, that's it.
Well, if the ballot then, and unfortunately it's too late in the week to follow up on this, but then the ballot would not have a place for a write-in, right? And it would be physically impossible to write in. But even that, even him coming out when there can be no write-in, has a negative effect on Doug Moylan's chances, because there will be some people who don't understand, who don't get the word, who say, I'm going to write in Peter Santos because I really like him. And when they get to the polls, they won't see a Peter Santos write-in, so they just won't vote. And not voting is a vote for Levin Camacho. So, yeah, it's just not a good situation at all.
And it's kind of torn because there really isn't a momentum for him to write on, because he wasn't in the primary.
No,
he didn't do anything before the primary.
No.
So I'm wondering where he would get his votes from.
It appears that he is trying to mount a Ken Leon Guerrero campaign, being very, very critical of almost everything and getting a lot of earned media. Okay, it's that time of the day for me to say goodbye to our president, so let's go away. Let's go, Brandon.
President Biden told officials at the British Embassy that America mourns for Queen Elizabeth. As for him and the First Lady personally, he expressed,
"She was a great lady. We're so delighted we got to meet her."
The last time the president spoke with the Queen was at the G7 summit at Cornwall in June of 2021. Britons will mourn for several days, per tradition, prior to her funeral. The White House has not confirmed whether the president and first lady will attend.
Fox's Gernal Scott, the longest-serving British monarch, Queen Elizabeth, died Thursday afternoon at the age of 96. Her eldest son, now King Charles III, will address his nation this evening. In Georgia, 2 Cobb County sheriff's deputies have been shot and killed trying to serve an arrest warrant in the Atlanta suburb of Marietta. 2 suspects are now in custody. The Justice Department has told a federal judge in Florida they intend to appeal her ruling ordering the appointment of a special master over evidence seized in the raid on former President Trump's home.
In the filing, the Justice Department also wants Judge Aileen Cannon's decision prohibiting the use of seized records for investigative purposes put on hold. That, federal prosecutors say, would irreparably harm its investigation, and an intelligence community assessment of the classified records recovered from Mar-a-Lago.
Fox's Jared Halpern. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un says his country will never give up its nuclear weapons. His legislature has passed a law barring any nuclear negotiations and requiring the military to automatically launch nukes if their leadership comes under attack. America is listening to Fox News.
Get all of your favorite Fox News podcasts ad-free on Apple Podcasts with Fox News Podcasts Plus. From Trey Gowdy, the Fox News Rundown, Will Kane, Brian Kilmeade, and so much more. Go to foxnewspodcasts.com for all the details. The Fox News Rundown, a contrast of perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. Your daily dose of news twice a day, featuring insight from top newsmakers, reporters, and Fox News contributors. Listen and subscribe now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com. New from the Fox News Podcasts Network, Dana Perino, co-host of the 5 and America's Newsroom on Fox News Channel, returns to the world of audio with a new limited-time podcast, Everything Will Be Okay with Dana Perino. Building off the success of her best-selling book of the same name, Dana provides an unequaled brand of advice built on real-life experience and interviews experts and individuals that make a difference in the lives of others. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
President Biden will travel to Ohio today to help cut the ribbon on an Intel semiconductor plant to be built outside Columbus. Yesterday, the president continued his criticisms of some supporters of the GOP, telling a Democratic National Committee gathering outside Washington.
The extreme set of MAGA Republicans has chosen to go backwards, full of anger, violence, hate, and division. And that's what their game is. And together, Democrats, independents, and mainstream Republicans can choose a different path. Forward to a future of unity and hope and some optimism.
The president vowed Democrats will ban assault weapons and codify abortion into federal law if they hold on to majorities in Congress. Former Trump political advisor Steve Bannon defiant after his indictment yesterday in New York on charges he defrauded donors to a fund to build a wall on the U.S. southern border.
We are not going to back down, and they will not be able to shut me up. And I'm going to stay and fight this.
An earlier federal prosecution on those charges was ended early last year by a presidential pardon. The mayor of Washington, D.C., declaring an emergency over the migrants being bused to the city from the border.
Mayor Muriel Bowser's declaration is prompted by the arrival of more than 9,000 asylum seekers since April. It allows her to open an Office of Migrant Services to provide support to migrants who are being bused to our nation's capital from Texas and Arizona. Bowser hopes that the federal government will pay for those services. The mayor believes the governors of those two states will continue to drop migrants off by the busload this fall. Gary Baumgarten, Fox News.
A bipartisan group of 8 Colorado district attorneys has unveiled online data sites providing transparency to the public on the cases they prosecute, including the racial and economic makeup of the defendants and the kinds of sentences that are handed down. It's part of a trend nationally among prosecutors to provide more transparency to the public on how the justice system works. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
In a world where our cuisines unite, the Colonel has joined together your favorite extra crispy KFC fried chicken with an authentic